Hi all, now we're at the part where a lot of people consider this one of some of the funnest things to do. We're going to be making head pins, twisty tendrils, ribbons, and some annealed steel wire shapes. And the wire that we have, this is 20 gauge copper wire, this is 22 gauge, and this is 18 gauge. We have 28 gauge and we have 19 gauge of the annealed steel wire. You can get these from the your Ace hardware store, True Value, Lowe's, Home Depot. They're very, very inexpensive. And I have found that these are a lot easier to enamel than, or to keep the enamel on actually, than copper. We're going to have our crock pot. We're turning that on. And I would have that turned on and go about my business in the studio for a few minutes, but we're going to talk for a few minutes, so we're going to be okay here. It was very frustrating to me to make head pins and spend an afternoon, place them by my side, go about preparing, making the jewelry, and then go to use a head pin and to find out that the enamel had cracked off without any handling at all. So it took a lot of experimentation to come up with this system, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. Before I turn the torch on, I just want to show you these pliers. These are called cross-locking pliers, and what happens is that they are staying closed without any pressure on them. Actually, it takes the pressure to be able to open them. So when we're doing things like the twisty tendrils, or we're going to be enameling both ends, this is a very handy thing to have because I don't have to be squeezing this the entire time that I'm working with the wire. Let me explain to you what we're going to be doing because, you know, once the torch goes on, it gets a little bit loud. So what I'm going to be doing is holding this wire in the sweet spot of the flame. It's going to ball up, and I'm going to put one coat of either clear for silver or medium fusing clear. That's going to be my first coat. Then I'm going to fuse that enamel again, and I'm going to dip it into a colored enamel. It will either be one coat or two coats. If you want to have a large, if you want your head pin to be large, you want to make your metal part large. You do not want to build up the mass of the head pin with the enamel. You want to build it up with the copper metal. And then we're going to fuse that. Then I'm going to do something called flame annealing, which is where I bring the head pin out further into the non-visible part of the flame, and then I'm going to put it into the heated vermiculite. So let's go ahead and get started with this. This is going to be a twisty tendril. This is about 6 inches long. Dipping it into the colored enamel, flipping this over. Let's go ahead and give that one more coat. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to flame anneal this. And I'm putting that in there to cool. So we're going to do a head pin. It's the same thing. This is a 20 gauge wire. We're going to draw a bead on the end. Dip it into the, this is clear for silver. One coat of the orchid. 2 coats. Do a flame annealing. Hold it for a few seconds. Now we're going to do something that I call a ribbon. And how we do that is we're just going to hold this in the center, in the middle of the wire, pull down, cross over, and then I'm going to adjust the length of these sides, these legs a little bit. This is what we have now. You don't want to create the enamel balls on here and then twist it over because we don't want to put any additional pressure on the enameled ends here. See if we can get them both going at the same time. Well, let's do one at a time. This is 18 gauge. It takes a little bit longer for it to heat up. Do our flame annealing. Hold it there for a few seconds. And put it in the top pot. Now there are certain colors that I do not even attempt to do with head pins. That would be red, any of the reds, orange, or yellows, because they crack off very easily. The blue-greens are great, cobalt's wonderful, orchid is great. But any of the other colors that are in the warm, warm colors, like the orange and reds, I would not even fool around with those, because it's going to give you a bunch of heartache. All right, so let's go ahead and work with this 19 gauge wire here. Now the thing about creating your wire forms, is that you want to keep the shape, the wires, fairly close together. You can just form them with your fingers, but you don't want to have large gaps that the enamel has to span the wires and build up, because it's glass and it can crack very easily. There's tension on it that's brought from the wire. So we don't want to, here's what we don't want. We don't want that. We don't want an outlier like this, where the enamel has got to fill in there. And the denser the form, the more success we're going to have as far as the enamel sticking to this. Now, what you're going to want to do is you will want to, it'll make it easier for you if you go ahead and you build in your closure or your bail while you're developing your form. So that's what we're going to do. Let me cut a little bit of this off. All right, so I'm just going to build the bail in. So that's what we've got right now. This will give me something to hold on to, and I'll also be able to thread my chain through that. So try to bring these together. You also want to be careful that this is not sticking out, because this even becomes more uncomfortable against your skin when it's got glass on it, as you can imagine. Let's go ahead and cut that off. Let's just bend that in a little bit. Coming out there, so we can just tuck that under. Okay, so we've got that tucked in. All right, so okay, here's our form, and what we've done is we've created our bail. This is the loop that is also helping to bind these wires together at the bottom, and this looks fairly tight. I mean, there are some spaces, but those are all within acceptable limits, so we're going to be okay with this. What I'm going to do is the same thing I did with the head pins, is I'm going to put one coat of clear for silver or medium fusing clear on this. Then I'm going to follow that up with mint and then with opalescent green. So now that I've got this to hold on to, my life is going to be a lot easier. So I'm not going to have to dangle this from a mandrel. Now we might have to enamel this in sections because it takes a lot to heat up this wire. And just move it back and forth in the flame. Just want to make sure that we coat this really well. Sometimes if the wire is thinner, like if you were using 28 gauge wire, you could melt openings in the wire. You know, you could direct the flame right at the wire and it would break through and it would kind of separate the wire. You'd end up with balls on both ends. I don't know if I can do that with this, but we can see. No, it's a thicker wire, so we're not going to be able to do that. But I think you can imagine what I'm saying. Let me turn this up. These pliers make it very easy to get a hold of this. My hand is relaxed. I'm not having to squeeze down on the wire. Makes this a lot easier. Now you can decide how much you want this covered. You might want to leave some of the dark metal showing through. We're going to give it a couple more coats. Just crank up your torch. This is why butane torches don't work. It just requires too much fire. You're fusing that in. So let's just give it some of this really luscious transparent that will really look nice in these recessed areas. You can see right in here that where I'm directing the flame, that's going to pool right in that area between the two wires. Give some nice depth. Okay, now here's the connection on the back here. That might break if I don't try to fill in those other areas. But I could also do something else and I could just kind of separate that and treat it as a separate wire. See what I'm saying? Right back in here. We're almost done with this. These make nice hoop earrings, very nice. Okay, we're going to do the flame annealing. Come back here. Now we put transparent on, and remember, transparent enamel takes just a little bit longer to cool than opaque does. Just kind of slowly allowing that. We're maintaining the temperature and allowing it to cool more gradually is what we're doing. Okay, now if that gets stuck on there, okay, what we're going to have to do on this is we're going to heat this up and get this unstuck. Okay, there we go. All right, so what we would do under normal circumstances is we would just really let that cool in there. We don't want to rush it, but let me see if I can find some of the other things that we did. Okay, this is the twisty tendril, and I'll show you some examples of the jewelry that I I use this a lot in areas where I'm using hardware, like at a clasp or something like that, where there's some dead space, and I just kind of wrap that around. Here's a head pin. And without touching this other thing, let's see if I can find the ribbon. Here's the ribbon. It's real cute. And now this has had some time to cool. And you can see. There are spaces where that's filled in, but the wires are close enough that we should be able to avoid a crack in there. It's just that if there's larger spaces between the two wires and it gets filled with this glass, then it can have a tendency to crack. Normally, I would not rush the cooling with this. I would just, leave it to sit in the crock pot overnight. But that was pretty simple. Just think of all the different things you can do in forms. Thanks for being with me here today. Bye-bye.